Hey, want to know a secret? You can pet the dogs!
Greetings.
Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, Diablo 4 is a wonderful game. I mean, don't get me wrong, every game has its issues, but I am absolutely loving my time with it so far. In general, I am someone who does get sucked into video games quite a bit, but nothing has sucked me in quite as hard as this for a while, and I am enjoying it like all hell. Based on the stats that I've seen of other people playing, I have to assume that I'm not the only one either. But the thing is, there are plenty of things about this game that you may well not know. Some of them are just helpful little details, and some of them are actually pretty majorly important to your success in Diablo 4. And while a lot of the time the game will tell you important things, sometimes they are either expressed in a non-specific way, told to you way later than you should know them, or they're just mentioned once early on in the game and then they become really easy to forget about later on. So today I'm going to be focusing on things that you may well not know about Diablo 4 that can drastically improve your experience as a whole, with the vast majority of this even having a notable effect on people in the end game, not even just people who are just starting. Without further ado then, let's start at the top with something that is interestingly a little bit counterintuitive. Leveling doesn't exactly mean power in this game. Sometimes leveling excessively can actually reduce your power in comparison to what you're fighting. What do I mean by this? Well, for the most part, the vast majority of the enemies in the game scale with you, depending on your level, and they do this to sort of stay on par with you and to avoid having you feel a feeling of complete pointlessness when you do activities like Helltide or Whispers of the Dead or just normal dungeons. Nightmare dungeons are excluded from this specifically, as the level of monsters inside is actually dependent on the tier of the Nightmare Sigil, but pretty much every other enemy in the game scales depending on your level, and so if the only way that you increase your power is by leveling, you won't actually feel that much stronger than the overworld foes. Instead, there are a few other things that you should focus on above just leveling, and let the pure experience just sort of come later on in the process. The first of these is Renown and Altars of Lilith specifically. Every altar gives you a small amount of bonus stats, but if you do collect all 160 of the altars, those stats really start to add up, and importantly, because enemies scale with your level, not with your stats, this will immediately give you more power than an equal level enemy would have against you. On top of that, Renown as a whole can give you more skill points and more Paragon points, all of which continues to make you even more powerful than someone at your level who doesn't do these things. And thus this lets you outscale the enemies that are purposely designed to scale to your level. This also applies to things like legendaries and builds, of course. A good build at level 50 is way stronger than just a decent build at level 50, but that is a bit more obvious. Past this, there are also Paragon Glyphs, which you upgrade in Nightmare Dungeons. A lot of people haven't been paying enough attention to these, but when you level these up and place them correctly, they can actually gain you quite a bit of power all by themselves, and that is another way to make yourself even stronger than your level would indicate, and thus stronger than enemies that are scaled to your level. So essentially, leveling is sort of deceptive. Yes, we do all want to get to level 100 at some point, of course, but if you just do that without doing these other things first, you'll actually be making yourself weaker than you should be, whereas if you do the other stuff first, you'll actually make your journey to 100 much easier and quicker. The second thing that you may not know then has to do with legendaries and how to actually make them stronger than they should be, and this specifically applies to numerical legendaries. The percentage-based legendaries, or ones with simpler effects, do not have any effect when you do this stuff with them, but any legendary that has a straight-up proper number on it is special and can be improved in an interesting way you may not expect. Before explaining how, let me actually show you an example of why you might want to care about this. Here is one of my legendary gear pieces with the aspect of bending on it for druids. This affects a barrier ability, but the important thing to look at here is the numbers at the bottom. The gray numbers represent the potential roll of this legendary, which is 191 to 383, but the actual number that I have on it is 431, almost 15% higher than what it says is the maximum roll. This can also be done with damage-based numerical legendaries, so again, it is actually quite a big deal if you do know how to do it. Notice here that I have 4 numerical legendaries here, with 2 of them being maximum rolls of their current potential. If we then take these to the blacksmith or the jeweler and then upgrade them there, the numerical values of the legendary effect will increase. For lower rolls, they will increase every upgrade. For higher rolls, it will be every other upgrade, which is actually sort of cool, right? It makes some sense because you're increasing the item power of the item, but the thing is, this does not happen if you upgrade a piece of gear with an imprinted legendary aspect on it. So because we are upgrading the legendary before extracting its aspect, we are actually straight up upgrading the aspect itself too. If we then extract that aspect, it will carry over the upgraded number, not the one that it had to start with, but the upgraded one. Normally, an imprinted legendary numerical effect does not increase as you upgrade the gear, but it does if you upgrade the item that you found it on before extracting. So essentially, if you find a cool legendary and you plan on extracting it and its effect is just a straight up number rather than a percentage, then you should absolutely upgrade it before extracting, and you'll actually upgrade the effect of the legendary itself.
We've planted our seeds.
Moving on to number 3 then, I've seen this come up in comments on our videos sometimes, so I know there are people out there who don't know yet, and if you are a bit confused by the last section of the video, then this is for you too. This is a pretty simple one. There is a setting that you can turn on in the options menu. Specifically in the gameplay section, there are 2 options called Advanced Tooltip Compare and Advanced Tooltip Information. They are off by default, but you probably want to turn these on. What they do is simply give you more information about your gear in every single way. When I talk about potential rolls for numbers on gear or legendaries, that is information that we have because of these advanced tooltip settings. The gray numbers in brackets on every one of my equipment are specifically what this will show you, and that is the potential roll of any legendary effect or even the general affixes on any piece of gear that you own, so that you know if you got a good roll or a bad roll on that effect, and that can change some of your general decision making for changing out gear, so it is quite important to have these on if you want to actually understand the equipment in the game. Fourth up today, let's talk a little bit about the attack power stat on your character's screen. That stat, stop paying so much attention to it, just straight up. A lot of people think that this number defines how strong they are, how strong their build is, but the truth is, it just doesn't. This number is just a basic calculation of your weapon's attack power, your attack speed, and your main stat, and a couple of other things too. It does not count things like crit chance, or crit damage, or vulnerable, or any stat boosts, or even what your skills are. So you can take off 90% of your equipment, and the number will not even change, which is genuinely quite silly. All of this to say, don't pay too much attention to this number. It tells you a little bit about your character, but it is far from the be-all end-all of power representation in the game. Be aware of it if you want to be, but don't use whether that number goes up or down to decide if you change that you've made to your build is good or not. It just isn't equipped for that. Fifth is a common mistake that I even made myself, which is just go over to the jeweler in town every once in a while and see what gems you can craft, okay? I was sitting around using flawless gems until level 78 because it didn't occur to me that I could craft the next gem level before I'd seen one of them drop in the game. But that's just not how it works. You can actually craft gems using the previous tier of gem the second that you reach the right level requirement at a 3-to-1 ratio. And for an example, you can get royal gems as early as level 70. These aren't insane upgrades going from one gem to the next tier of gem, but they are meaningful in general, and knowing that you could simply have better gems than you are currently using if you just walk over here and check is crazy. And again, I myself made that mistake for 8 levels, not having the highest tier of gem that was available to me. So I'm sure that plenty of other people are in the exact same boat, so just go talk to your friendly neighborhood jeweler and make sure, you know? 6th up today is just a sort of gameplay philosophy. When that sweet orange item drops when fighting enemies, your first instinct is to pick it up, of course it is, but what if your inventory is full? Most people will just throw something else out of their inventory to make space, but that's actually a waste. The trick here is any legendary that you leave behind without picking up from the floor will actually always make its way back to you in some way, shape, or form, by which I mean, it's not some weird philosophical statement, it's literal. If you leave a legendary in a dungeon, then when you next go back to town, your stash will have a little notification on it. Hover over it and it will tell you that it has lost items inside of it. Open your stash and voila, the legendary that you didn't pick up will be there, waiting for you. This will happen for up to 10 legendaries at a time, so if your inventory is full and a legendary drops, you can just let it go. It's still going to find its way to your stash, and this can add up to a fair amount of extra gold or materials if you are otherwise just constantly throwing things away to make space in your inventory for these. Our 7th point of note is actually a neat trick with Helltide, which actually allows you to farm higher tier loot than your character might be strong enough to get normally. Helltide is a fun activity that rewards you with cinders when you kill enemies or complete events within its walls. It's up about 50% of the time, so you can access it pretty frequently, and it's known as a pretty good source of gear in general. Mostly good for legendaries, especially because of the mystery chests chests, but you can get targeted gear from different chests within this as well, which is great for helping you gear up, especially if you are able to complete it earlier than you maybe should be. Well, that's where this neat trick comes in. If you have reached World Tier 4 but are not yet quite strong enough to comfortably do Helltide in World Tier 4, you can still actually get World Tier 4 upgrades while only fighting World Tier 3 enemies. How, you ask? Well, it's actually much simpler than you might think. Farm Helltide like normal on World Tier 3, but do not spend any of your cinders here. Farm as many of them as you want to spend, and then, well, switch to World Tier 4. Don't log out, no matter what, as logging out will just delete your cinders. Instead, teleport to Kyovashad, and then go to the World Tier statue in the northern square of the town, interact with it, and change to World Tier 4 that way. Now go back to the Helltide area, and bam, you'll notice that you have these cinders that you got from farming in World Tier 3, but now you can open World Tier 4 Helltide caches for significantly higher potential loot. Simple, yet also just so appetizingly powerful, right? Number 8 then is something that doesn't necessarily make you more physically powerful, but it will probably make you a little bit more mentally powerful. Any build in the game that focuses on using core skills a lot will know the agonizing feeling of hearing the words, "I don't have enough spirit for that," or "enough fury," or "enough essence," or "mana," or "energy," whatever your resource is for your class. If you play a class that spends your resources constantly, you'll probably also be spamming this button when you don't have enough resources for it yet, and your character will just constantly say that little sarcastic quip in your direction, "But did you know you can actually turn this off?" Again, head to the options menu, go to the sound category, and then all the way at the bottom of this section is a little setting called player audio on error. This makes your character complain when you do things like this, and, well, you can very simply just turn it right off. If you are constantly pressing a core ability without having enough resource, you probably know that you don't have enough already, so this can save you a bit of a headache in the long run. 9th then is actually really close by to this, also in the options menu, also on the audio page, and it's item drop sounds. This lets you set some reasonably specific parameters on what loot will give you audio cues when it drops. If you set this right, you can essentially just ignore any loot that doesn't have one of these audio cues play. It's simple, but it can actually make your gameplay and farming much smoother when you get to further parts of the game. Let's say you're at the stage of the game where literally the only thing that you care about now is legendaries. Move this little quality tick up to legendaries, and now rares won't make a sound anymore. Let's say specifically the only thing that you care about is one particular unique for your class that drops on a weapon. So turn off armor, jewelry, socketable, and other, then set minimum quality to unique, and now the only loot that will make a sound when it drops is unique weapons, so you know to pay attention then. Sure, it could be a little bit more specific than it is, letting you choose slightly more specific slots, but the fact that this exists in the first place is actually some really nice quality of life for when you get further into the game and are only looking for specific kinds of loot. Then finally is something somewhat abstract, but you may notice at times your horse can be a bit unruly, right? You press the spur button and then it barely goes any faster than it was already. Then it will just randomly slow down sometimes? Well, actually that's not random. It's actually related entirely to player inputs. The game just doesn't tell you about it, so you may well not have worked it out. To put it simply, your horse will move faster depending on how far away your cursor is from the center of the screen. Closer to the center slows it down, further from the center makes it speed up, and the same applies to the spur button, but even more so, where the horse will go ridiculously faster if you press spur with your mouse in the corner than it would with your mouse close to the center, which may be a minor control detail in theory, but will likely save you dozens of hours over your playtime with Diablo 4 once you know about it, so I hope this helps you out. And that's it for today, everyone. Just a nice pile of tips and information the game doesn't really tell you to help you out on your journey through Diablo 4. I hope it makes your life easier and your characters stronger. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.